What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show for Sherdog.com. And today I am here with the year in review for PFL Europe. And obviously I've covered all these cards throughout the year, before, during, and after, I suppose. And I actually think it's been a really good year for the PFL Europe. And I suppose maybe I did the PFL global review show, and you can look at PFL in a variety of different ways, I suppose. Like, you could look at PFL as a whole, you could look at PFL / Bellator, you could look at PFL in terms of the financials, in terms of the general feeling around the organization as a whole, or you can look at it in different promotions. And I think when you look at it in each different promotion, I think all of them are pretty positive. Now, I think, and I even saw Don Davis saying it the other day, like 2024 was about a year kind of getting everything together. We were left in a tough spot because of Bellator and all that, which was true. Like, did people expect them to do a little bit better? I think they probably did. I think they probably expected to do a little bit better themselves as a whole. But I must say, and it's probably not a popular thing to say, but I do think as individual promotions, the three, PFL MENA, PFL Europe, PFL Global, I actually thought they were all really good. They put on really good fights. The matchmaking, I would say 90% was very good. Europe was 100% probably good. MENA was probably 100% good as well. The global ones, there's a couple, and I spoke about that on the show that already have been out at this stage. As I said, the matchmaking good, the fight's good. The fighters that emerged at the end, very good. I would say if you had to hand pick the fighters they had contracted at the start of the year and pick out the winners, I would say out of how many was there? 14 with MENA, Global, and Europe. Maybe I might be one or two off there, but let's say there's 14. I'd say probably 12 of them were the choices they would have. Like, look, if they could have picked Dakota Ditcheva, I think they probably would have picked her, and a few more. And now maybe they would have picked Lochnan, maybe. But even with, say, that one, the quality of fighter Timur Hizriev is, the quality of fighter Musayev is, and others, we'll get into the Europe here in a second. I think they'd be very happy with it, and they should be very happy, because that's what it's all about. They have unfurled and unleashed some very good fighters. And I think, look, we can talk about whether people have bought into it, or whether people are appreciating it or whatever, but I think when I come on here and I talk about these shows, it's mostly from the point of view of a fight fan sitting down to watch fights. And people, like, for myself as well, even, like, what am I mostly concerned about when I'm doing these shows, especially now? Maybe other shows may be different, but I'm mostly concerned with good fights and what the promotion gets in the end of it. And when we're talking specifically about PFL Europe, what does the promotion want to get in the end of that? Well, they want to get fighters who can go to PFL Global and fight there. Now, at the end, what I want to do here is kind of have an overview of the winning four fighters and say how they will get on in PFL Global, or how they could become stars or whatever. Now, quick spoiler, I think all very good, to be honest. I think it was a great year for PFL Europe. Now, again, just and we're going through the cards here. Obviously, only 4 cards here for PFL Europe, all of which were very good. But I said at the start of the year there was 2 ways PFL Europe could go. Like, last year, I thought it was very much all new pros, or basically, all people who were, with one or two exceptions, but all people who are like maybe 15 fights into their career or less, looking for a big opportunity. Dan Hardy looked at them and saw the talent and brought them through and produced some great fighters. This year, I think it was mostly that, but then with the addition of some guys who, and maybe they didn't have too many fights more than 15, but you get me here, like Jack Grant, someone like that, someone like Ken Musa. There were a few of those in it. Even guys like Thomas Grunwald, who is experienced enough, Tommy Langowski, who's experienced enough. Maybe they don't have a whole bunch of fights, but they mightn't have been in it last year. And I actually think they brought something to it. And they've done a similar thing in PFL MENA, and it worked out great for them there. It's worked out great for them here, because what does it give? It gives the younger guys the opportunity to go in there against the more experienced guys, test themselves, and when they win, they're improving as they go, and they can prove that they are a great fighter. So, honestly, I think this is brilliant. Like, if you were to design a way of bringing fighters through, this is a really good way of doing it. Now, I think there could be issues, like if you brought a fighter in and maybe it was too early and they were only, let's say, 3 or 4 fights into their career. In Europe, one anyway, maybe it'll be different. Let's say PFL Africa coming up next year, or even it's possible to do, I think, more in PFL MENA. But I think with the level that was in PFL Europe, I think it would be tough. So let's get into it. So what I want to do is I'll just read you the brackets here before we start, and then we'll go event by event. So the welterweights. So there was welterweight, lightweight, bantamweight, and women's flyweights this year. Let's start with the welterweights. They had Langowski against Zindelli in the first matchup. They had, and we'll go through the cards to go through these fights in a second. Jack Grant, Charlie Leary, Yassin Najin, and Daniele Micheli, Ibrahim Mane, and Nosso Pedro. And then in the lightweights, they had Kazuba, Musa, Shizov, Skitizi, Yazid Hussein, Ignacio Capella, Anatoly Bal, and Connor Hughes. At bantamweight, Dean Garnett, Anton Depep, Khurshid Kakurov, Thomas Grunwald, Dominic Wooding, Julien Pierre Lopez, Alexander Luster, and Alipin Karabult. Now, I think everyone managed to get through injury free, apart from Khurshid Kakurov, and he won his first fight. We'll get to that in a second, against Thomas Grunwald, and then Lewis McGrillen Evans was brought in, which, would you say it was a blessing in disguise? Somewhat. I think it probably somewhat was. So let's get into the cards and let's talk about them. And as we get into these cards, I think the breakdown and how they put together these cards is very interesting as well. So the 4 cards this year, the 4 PFL Europe cards. The first one, March 7th, it was Baki against Doumbé, not a PFL Europe fight. The second one, June 8th, Savannah Marshall versus Marilla Vargas, not a PFL Europe fight. The third one, September 28th, Stevie Ray versus Lewis Long, not a PFL Europe card. And then the finale, 14th December, Abdullah Durhimov against Leandro Staropoli, again, not a PFL Europe fight. And I'll be honest, right? I kind of, me personally, I don't like that. I think this is a PFL Europe event. All 4 of these are PFL Europe events. I think you should do as much as you can to make PFL Europe a thing. Make it a big thing. Make it important, right? And me personally, if I was doing it, and again, we're talking here purely from like a sporting point of view, I would do everything I can to make them the most important things. Now, if you're to tell me you have Cedric Doumbé and it's on in France, I understand. I want to make that the main event, right? And they're going to make that the main event. But if you're asking for me, from my point of view, I'm going to go, look, I'm going to, I'm going to give up my belief for a second and realize, look, you need to sell tickets. You need to be smart about it. Doumbé is your star. A question must arise, well, why is Doumbé not actually in the tournament? But again, maybe that's a question for next year. Maybe he will be in it. The season, even. Although this is more of a tournament than a season, isn't it? Because there isn't the first part of it. Anyway, I think I've no problem with it being Doumbé, right? Or I've no problem with a big star being in the main event. But not, first of all, not always, and definitely not for the finale. Like, the one with the Lazy King, again, maybe I understand about the Lazy King, although that wasn't the best performance in the world, and I'm not sure they would do it again. But, in my opinion, you cannot bury your championship fights. And now I don't necessarily think they buried the championship fights, but I think you should make them a massive thing. You should be like, these, they're calling this the Champions League of MMA now. As someone who's watched the Champions League all my life, this is not how the Champions League works. It's absolutely not. But come on, push it. You have something good there. Tell the people you have something good. Make them realize. Like, it's easy to realize because I realize it. I really like it. I think this is fantastic. And this might sound like a criticism, but it's actually not. It's like, you have something cool here. You have something good here. Let's push it. Let's make it even bigger. And I think that's something that needs to be done with PFL Europe, especially going forward. Now, maybe you could say it for the other ones, they're still very much growing. And look, it's going to be the first year of PFL Africa next year. PFL MENA, it was very good this year, but maybe it doesn't have, say, some of the names that PFL Europe would have. And I think as well, going forward, maybe you'd be better off getting some names signed. And like, even like, you have a lot of Irish guys signed there. Like, put them into the PFL Europe. Like your Derek Kelly's, your Nathan Kelly's, even maybe Kieran Clark is a little bit past that now, but even still, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. You have a lot of good name guys there, and get them going. But anyway, we'll go card by card here and maybe speak about that. So the first card was probably the most stacked they had of the year, because they had Doumbé on it and they had the Lazy King as well, and then they had all of the lead-in fights as well, all of the PFL Europe fights, and there was some very, very good stuff obviously there. The Doumbé fight, obviously this was crazy, and just to reflect on it, I suppose, a few months later, so this was in March 7th, so what have we, January, February, March, 3 months into the year, 9 months later, my opinion still is, so Cedric Doumbé got a toe injury, and what did he say? He said he stood on a bit of wood or something, or a bit of debris in the thing. I don't know. I still think there was some sort, even if it was that, or even some sort of injury, you can't stop the fight yourself. I think everyone, I remember saying at the time, I think everyone kind of could have done maybe a little bit better there. Mark Goddard, I think it was a referee, wasn't he? I think he probably could have said, look, here, what's wrong? Let me examine this. Let me see what's going on here. But at the same time, I remember saying at the time, you can't have too much. If you're Doumbé, you can't have too much of a crib to make there, because what's the referee supposed to do? Like, he looks at someone and they're limping or whatever on a bad leg, and like, injuring someone's leg is a way to win the fight, or you injuring your leg. I don't know. I think it's a situation where, we'll talk about Doumbé more in a few minutes, but he was obviously at the finale event, and everyone seems to want to see him fight Baki again. I think it'll make a lot of sense. Obviously, Baki 8-0, so Doumbé still 6-1. He wasn't doing amazingly well in that fight either. I think with Doumbé as well, I just wonder, is Doumbé as good and as big of a star as they make out? Because that's when I say that, right? I think it's brilliant that they are making him feel that way, or pushing him that way. I'm just not sure he is that right now. And if he isn't that, it doesn't really matter, really, does it? They push someone, it doesn't work, grand. But if he is that, they've started very early with the push, and it'll, in the long run, it'll be absolutely brilliant. So I've no qualms about it at all. But again, he lost this fight in weird fashion, but that was that. The Lazy King was in this one as well. Not a great year for the Lazy King, to be honest. Like, he came away with a couple of wins, but I think his stock has probably gone down a tad. And I get him in the tournament next year. Whether it's the global, whether it's this one, he has to be next year. There's no opinions. No opinions. He has to be in one of the seasons next year. And then we had all of the PFL Europe fights. Ibrahim Amane was, again, not an amazing year for him. He got the split decision win here over Pedro. He did well there. Capella, he looked really good this year, and he's a guy maybe who could come again next year. He beat Yazid Kashoun. If memory serves me correct, Kashoun was the favourite for that. It was close anyway, but he finished him off. Jacob Kazuba beat Musa. Do you know what? I think that's good matchmaking, because after what Kazuba did last year, I think he needed he needed a test like that against someone who, like Musa, who's been around for a long time. Now, just on Kazuba as well, again, they call it the Champions League of MMA. Well, he won this, his Nations League, let's put it that way. If that happens, you're supposed to be in the Champions League, you're supposed to be in the PFL Global, and he wasn't. So, it's not exactly, you win and you qualify for the next round. He actually had to go back and do it again, which I heard him say in the broadcast it was like a decision they made together type of thing. Now, I wonder how true that is. But, I've no problem with that as well. If you think, and he thinks maybe I need a little bit more experience, it didn't work out so great for Jacob and Dye, who went to the PFL Global this year. So maybe it was the right decision. And you look, in the end, we'll get to it, but it looks like it was. The next win was a very good shoulder choke by Daniele Micheli against Nassim Yazid. Again, Micheli, a guy who I watched a lot of because he was fighting, obviously, my countryman Peter Queally the year before this, if I'm not mistaken. It was one that ended in a horrendous eye injury and no contest. And before that, I think he was probably an underrated guy. He's a very, very good fighter, and I think he showed that this year, so a good win to start off for him. And then, below that, we had Masaraf in the heavyweight division in the showcase. Patrick Cabarora had a few showcases this year, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't in one of the seasonal tournaments next year. Then Connor Hughes had a great performance against Anatoly Bal, knocked him out early. Skatizi against Shivas, probably one of the shocks of the year. He got the submission over... Skatizi got the submission over Shivas. And then Zendeli, again, look green as grass here, but beat Tommy Langovsky, a guy who's been around for a long time and in a showcase. Kevin Dell against Hussein Najid. Moving on to the next round, June 8th. This was the fight I really had a problem with being the main event, and this was in Newcastle, and Savannah Marshall and Morella Vargas. And I know Savannah Marshall is from the area, and I know it's her first MMA fight, and you're it's a bit of the unknown, and she's a UK boxing star or whatever. I understand it, but it was an abomination of a fight. Really, it was a terrible fight, and it had no business being in the main event. There was Kane Musa fought Dylan Tuke on this card. Chanel Dyer was on this card. Ibrahim Ibrahimov was on this card. Jack Grant, Lewis McGrillen Evans, Khurshid Kakarov was on this card. There was some really good fights in this card. And that being the main event, And I have no problem with Savannah Marshall coming over and trying out MMA, and I'll have no problem with her again. But let's say, have her open up the main card in her hometown, right? There's no problem with that. But the main event, I just think it's a tad disrespectful to the other fighters. But anyway, so that was not a great fight, but she got the finish in the end. Then Dylan Tuke got a very good win here. Obviously, he was in the tournament last year, not in it this year, but he fought Kane Musa and beat him. That was a very good win. I'm sure Dylan will be back next year. Jack Grant beat Charlie Leary and finished him very, very early. And then we had our guy Lewis McGrillen Evans, who we mentioned earlier, the injuries came and he came in, but the win over Matthias Zarafas, who is obviously coming through around here in Ireland, very, very good fighter. And that was, that might have been the toughest fight this year for Lewis McGrillen Evans. So a great year for Lewis McGrillen Evans that started off here. Then we Chanel Dyer. She looked absolutely fantastic in this against Mariam Tachina. And actually, I mentioned injuries. Chanel was another person who actually fell out through injury, and that maybe later in the tournament than Kakarov. But anyway, then we had Ibrahimov against Josh Reed, and this was a real good win for him. Josh Reed, if people haven't been watching the Cage Warrior scene for years, he fought Nathaniel Wood in one of the greatest domestic fights of all time. I hate the word domestic, but anyway, we call it that. Domestic fights of all time. And Ibrahimov, okay. So for our American viewers out there, so John Jones, right? John Jones came through, and it was famously his brothers were two NFL players. Ibrahimov, he has two brothers who are coming through as prospective Premier League players. Now, they haven't made it yet, but one of his brothers is in the Manchester United reserves and plays a lot and has scored a good few goals for him, and is touted as a person who is even if he doesn't play for Man United, he will more than likely be a Premier League player or a Serie A player, maybe something like that. So he is a real good stock and a real athletic family, and obviously he's doing his thing as well. So he's going to have a very interesting career, but he's a very interesting story as well, coming out of Manchester, but with the obviously with the Dagestani background, and he shows that he's a real top prospect. Then we Julian Lopez against Dominic Wooding again. Like, it's been a tough few years for Dominic Wooding. He was the cage warrior champion at one stage. Tried to force his way out of his contract, wasn't able to do it. Then eventually lost the cage warrior title, came over to PFL, has lost a few fights there as well. It hasn't been an amazing run for Dominic Wooding. Great win for Karolina Wojcik. She fought Danny McCormack over in Invicta for the title, ended up losing that and came over here and has had a good year. He went in there against Lisa Shivers, who's no joke, and she won that fight. Probably the shock of the year was Claudia Pacella beating Mark Ewan. Mark Ewan, I thought, was probably the favourite, in my opinion, to win this, up there with Kakarov and up there with what's his name? The guy who won it last year. Let me scroll back. Kazuba to win the lightweight tournament this year, but Pacella had other ideas, and it was a great win for him. But Mark Ewan will be back. I think he's a very good prospect, and I think he'll probably be in it next year. Then Valentinas Skatizi, again, someone who had another great year, and it was, I think the level in that tournament is getting better and better, but she did well this year, and she won that fight there. As I mentioned, Kukrov beat Gronval. Wanless got a win. Alexander Luster beat Karabult in the tournament, and Paulina Wisniewska opened up the card against Dee Begley. I'll be honest, Dee went in a round and a half with her, and I think if you look back at the year in review, I suppose, to go around and a half with Wisniewska, with how good she looked afterwards, is probably a credit to Dee at this stage of her career, and Dee will bounce back as well. But Wisniewska looks a real talent, and we'll talk more about her in a second. The third event, I think this was great matchmaking. This is over in Scotland, and again, I've no problem with Stevie Ray being the main event here. As much as my crib about the tournaments being the top stuff, this was an obvious main event. And I think what I said about the matchmaking, I think the main event matchmaking, the co-main event matchmaking were dead right. Like, Stevie Ray and Lewis Long at very similar stages of their career. Robert Whiteford, Roger Huerta, similar age, similar stages of their career. Now these, and especially the Whiteford Huerta one, not so much Ray Long. That was a good fight, and he got the Glasgow Twister again, or whatever you call it. I think the Whiteford Huerta fight, obviously both well past their prime, but both had a very similar past their prime sort of level, and it was no problem. It was like it was like a Legends fight, and it was a good fight for what it was. So I would have hated for Robert Whiteford to be thrown in there with fucking Kakarov or someone like that, or or Luster or something, and or Huerta thrown in there with with Lewis McGill and Evans or whoever it might have been, and it could have been big issues. And I've the wrong weight class there, but you know what I mean. So one of the younger up and coming guys, but to put them in there together, it was good. Obviously Whiteford won the co-main event, and Stevie Ray won the main event. Mark Ewan, obviously a Scotsman, got back to winning ways there, as did Lewis McGill and Evans against Dean Garnett. And if we were to have a Sheehan Show fight of the year for not just PFL, not PFL Europe, not UFC, Bellator, One Championship, all of them, this was the fight of the year. This was the best fight that happened in 2024. Lewis McGill and Evans versus Dean Garnett ended in a third round knockout, but there was about 74 knockdowns in this. Rock'em, sock'em, robots, unbelievable fight. And just before that, Alexander Luster rear naked choked Julian Lopez and looked fantastic on it. That meant they were meeting in the finale, and we'll talk about that in a second, obviously. But after that had happened, it's like, oh my God, I cannot wait for this fight. And that's exactly what you want. So that was absolutely perfect. They did the same with Zindelli and Micheli, and they did the same with Kasuba and Hughes. They put them back to back to back to back, and obviously Dyer and Wisniewska as well, which is really smart. Really smart, because literally, the lad just fought, here's who he's going to be fighting, and it immediately happened. So I think this was, and do you know what? I hadn't realised that until just now, to be honest, but that's very smart. Very smart. So Zindelli beat Jack Grant, again a close fight, and a guy who started off the year as green as Zindelli, to beat a guy like Jack Grant, who I have a lot of respect for. He's been in there with Ian Gary, and obviously Cage Warriors, fought for the title and all the different things, been around since God was a boy. For Zindelli, someone as green as him to win that fight was very good. And then Micheli got a finish over Ibrahim Mane. Was that the biggest shock of the year in PFL Europe? Probably was. Mane was talked about as of those 4 guys, probably the favourite to win it, I would say, at that stage. And Michele had other ideas. Kasuba and Skadizi. Skadizi put on a great performance in that one, as did his sister, Valentina, who split decision against Chanel Dyer. She really could have won that fight. Conor Hughes just before that as well for the lightweights. Capella, Capella had a bit of a back and forth year, but he's a good fighter, and it was a great win for Hughes. And then Wisniewska beat Karolina Wojcik, who put on a good performance as well, but it was just too much. And then there was Jim Owl, Zaravs and Parinta as the undercard there. So the finale, I as much as I liked the last card and how the match made it, I did not like this one at all. You had the Lazy King Sarapoli in a pretty poor fight, to be honest. I think Lazy King looked bad. Sarapoli could have won this fight. You had Habarora against Safsa. That was a great fight, to be fair, but it very well could have been an undercard fight. I don't think there would have been any shame in that. And you had one of the worst fights of the year, Michael Grogu against Lamine Sen in a heavyweight fight that had no business being there whatsoever. So, you had that, and then you had one of the title fights, and you had another one after, and then you had to do mid-sides. We'll get to that in a second. Then you had 2 more title fights. Like, one of your title fights was the 3rd fight of the night. No, not for me. Not for me. You're PFL Europe. Be proud of PFL Europe. Put it at the top. Let's make this a thing. And you want to have Lazy King as the main event because he's like the French star. Well, let's have Lazy King as the main event, and let's have a 5-fight main card, and the 4 title fights be the other 4 fights in the main card. Have Habarora finish out the prelim card because you think he's going to be a star, and Bob's your uncle. That's perfect. Open up the card with the Dumbe decides, and have that funny tournament, I suppose, to start it all off. I don't like at all the way they did it, but having said that, the fight, and I think that's proved right because of how good the PFL Euro fights were. Now, I'm not criticising any of the fights necessarily. It's just how they were kind of laid out. The playoffs, brilliant. The finale, not so much, I don't think. But let's get to the actually, before we get to the title fights, because I want to kind of finish out on them. On the undercard, Pachela again had another fight against Oscar Onsworth. He looked very good in that one. Owen Sheridan, a young Irish guy coming through, he dominated Bryce Belghazi. He looked good. And then the Dumbe decides. So there was 3 fights, and Dumbe had 2 contracts, and he ended up giving out 3. And it was, I like the idea. Honestly, I like the idea. Look, the fights weren't amazing. I think it would have benefited them if they were earlier on in the card. Also, the fact he gave out 3 signatures, 3 contracts, it kind of defied the whole point. I'm like, don't do that again. I would have preferred if he'd given out 1 and gone, here, you weren't good enough. This is the only guy getting it. That would have been better. But like, Dumbe was on commentary and he was cursing and blinding and everything, which I actually thought was very funny, to be fair. But like, this is after one of your title fight. Nah, that's not right. Like, have this on the undercard, no problem. Have this in the early prelims, no problem. I would do it again. Honestly, if I was them, I would do it again. Don't let Dumbe have the microphone for as long this time, because that definitely went overboard. But yeah, usually this isn't the type of thing I would like. I don't think it's befitting of maybe one of the top promotions in the world. But again, it's a little bit of fun. I'm not going to cry over it too much. Again, just put it earlier in the card, and I don't think anyone would complain too much. But the standout on it, I suppose, was Salvo Gidice. He got a good win, but he's very young in his career. Capanella got a triangle choke finish, and Jura Grain, I didn't think he should have got a contract. He kind of got better as the fight went, but not amazing. But to finish it off, we had 4 champions crowned, and let's go through them fight by fight. Paulina Wisniewska beat Valentina Skitisi. It was an interesting one. The stoppage, I suppose, a little bit complicated. It wasn't a early stoppage, wasn't a late stoppage. Well, it was questionable. Let's put it that way. It's questionable. But I think Wisniewska landed a big knee, knocked down Skitisi, and held her in a position to finish her off. But at the same time, look, she was, no matter what happened, if it went on another 5 seconds, I think she would have won it anyway, definitely. But Wisniewska, she's big and tall and rangy, and all I thought after this fight was how good she looked and how we need fighters for Ditcheva. And if they're doing a tournament again next year with Ditcheva in the global season, she has to be in it, I think. I think there's no other option. She's, I don't think any of maybe the older guard are going to give issues to Ditchev, but maybe the younger guard will, and maybe she's one of them. And I would definitely put her in the PFL Global next year if they're doing one. Credits to Katisi. Looks, this fight only 20 seconds, but her previous fights, she has improved and improved and improved. And if they do this tournament again next year, PFL Europe, I think she should be back in it without a shadow of a doubt. Then we Florim Zendelli. He got the rear naked choke over Daniele Micheli. Again, came in. I always use the word green with Zendelli, but by the end of this year, I don't think he looked that green. He looked really good here and, outworked Micheli. Micheli got tired. He kind of gave it his all early. And I think maybe the bright lights got to Micheli a little bit again. A guy who maybe could come back next year and do it all over again. A guy who did come back and did it all over again was Jacob Kazuba, who won the lightweight tournament, beating Conor Hughes. And this was one of the comebacks of the year. Hughes had won the first 2 rounds. Looked like, we were kind of a changing of the guard here, but Kazuba just clawed his way back into it and ended up getting the finish in the 4th round. And again, for Kazuba, you have to put him in that tournament next year. The problem is, who you're going to leave out of that tournament if you're stacking it with a lot of your, a lot of your Bellator and PFL lightweights. Kazuba might find it tough to get into it, but we'll see on that. But this was a great performance. Conor Hughes again, I think he should be back in PFL Europe next year. And then Lewis McGrillen Evans won the bantamweight tournament, beat Alexander Luster. I picked Luster coming in based on maybe him being a more technical fighter, but I think McGrillen Evans showed here that he can be both a technical fighter and a marauder, because he did a bit of both here and it worked out splendidly for him. He looked absolutely fantastic and ended up dominating him for the whole fight and getting the finish. So there was very little purple patches from Luster here, although he kept in there and he did land his shots, but he never took the initiative from McGrillen Evans. But he never gave up either. He never gave in, and it took McGrillen Evans having to finish him to get the win here. And with that, Lewis McGrillen Evans is the Sheehan Show PFL Europe Fighter of the Year. And funnily enough, he'd won less fight than everyone else in terms of the actual tournament. I know he had a fight before that on one of the cards, but he was in the fight of the year. He was in probably the second fight of the year. He put up the best performances. He fought some very good guys in Dean Garnett and Alexander Luster. I think people maybe don't realize how good Luster is because of that fight, but he is a very good fighter. It's just McGrillen Evans didn't make him look good. Very, very, very good. So to recap the 4 champions, I would say Wisniewska said it. I think she should be in the PFL Global next year. Zendelli, I think it might be a bit of an issue if he was to go and fight the level of welterweights that, like, if they put him in there with Shamil Musayev or Umalatov, is he ready for that level yet? I don't think so. Now I said at the outset, what are they doing bringing Kazuba back in? But maybe it'd be better off for him to go back in. And you know what? I wouldn't say. I think with Lewis McGrillen Evans, I would say a similar thing. But if you're doing a bantamweight tournament and you want it to be exciting, you have to put Lewis McGrillen Evans into it. So I think he would move on if that's a possibility. And Kazuba, that's a no-brainer. He's won it 2 years in a row. Again, might be tough to find a place for him, but he has to be in it. Has to be in it next year. So that is it. It's been a tremendous year. Just to run through it again, all the results and the end of it. So the welterweights, Langowski was beaten by Zendelli. Grant beat Leary. Micheli beat Najid. And Mane beat Pedro to make semi-finals of Zendelli versus Grant and Micheli versus Mane. And in the end, it was Zendelli who was in the finale against Micheli and won via submission. Florian Zendelli, the welterweight champion. The lightweights, Kazuba beat Musa to meet Skatizi in the semi-final, who beat Shivak. Capella met Conor Hughes in the semi-final as he beat Kashun and Hughes beat Bal. Kazuba beat Skatizi to meet Hughes in the final, who beat Capella, and then Kazuba beat Hughes in the 4th round with a knockout. Dean Garnett and Karshut Kokarov won in the 1st round. Kokarov was injured, so Dean Garnett met Lewis McGrillen Evans in the fight of the year. Jean-Pierre Lopez met Alexander Luster after they beat Dominic Wooding and Cara Bullitt respectively. Then it was McGrillen Evans and Luster in the finales after they won their fights, and Lewis McGrillen Evans won. And then Chanel Dyer and Valentina Skatizia met in the semi-finals after beating Torchanev and Lasau, respectively. Wojciech beat Jeevers, and Wisniewska beat Begley. Dyer beat Skatizia to meet Wisniewska in the final after she beat Wojciech. And then Paulina Wisniewska. Actually, Dyer didn't make it to the final, obviously, because she was injured. Wisniewska beat Skatizia in the final to become the champion. So there you go. Wisniewska, Luster, Hughes, and Michelli are your PFL Europe champions. Lewis McGrillen-Evans is your... did I say Luster? McGrillen-Evans, Kazuba, Zindelli, and Wisniewska are your PFL Europe champions. Lewis McGrillen-Evans is your PFL Europe Sheehan Show Fighter of the Year. And that is it. Thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com. And I'll see you all next time.